Hello, and thank you all for joining us today for our new webinar. This is titled Inner and Outer Diversity and Inclusion in 3D, Discovering, Designing, and Delivering Innovative D&I. This presentation is brought to you today by Mark Garkin. He is the stress doctor. He is a nationally acclaimed speaker, writer, and motivational psychohumorist. Mark is a founding partner and stress resilience consultant for the Nepali Diaspora Be Well Initiative, leadership training consultant for the International Embry-Riddle Aeronautics University, and he's a former stress and team building consultant for the U.S. Postal Service and U.S. Army. He is the author of Practice Safe Stress, Four Faces of Anger, Preserving Human Touch in a High-Tech World. And Mark is presenting today, and he would like for us to interact with us. He will be asking us questions throughout his presentation. When he asks those questions, if you would like to answer them, please do so by typing into the chat box that is on the side panel of this webinar. If you have any questions throughout his presentation, you can also type those questions into the chat box. Mark will be checking the chat box, and he will be reading your comments, and he's looking forward to you interacting with us. So we would like to go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Mark, are you?
Yes, I'm here, and thank you, Mavis, for all your help in the introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm really excited about today's webinar, and of course, this is a prelude to the conference presentation. I'm especially excited because there's a lot of new material that I put together for this presentation, and I'm really going to be curious to see your thoughts and what happened to my webinar? Ooh. Okay, there we go. Really going to be curious to see your, ideas and feedback. So anyway, first let me tell you how I approach any program that I do. My goal is to help an audience get fit, F-I-T. I'm going to make it fun, interactive, and thought-provoking. Now, while I say it's going to be fun, it is, but I can be tough. I remember this State Department manager one time saying to me, well, what do you call it if you don't have any stress? And I said, denial. So I'm sure nobody's in denial, but we're going to try to really make things lively. Some program objectives, we're going to do a quick exercise on popular phrase, kind of give you some systemic perceptions of D&I, and then I get into some of my own concepts, the Quadruple A. I'm going to talk about letting go. Yeah.
Mark, can you please hit that screen button? We can't see your presentation right now.
Which one? The webcam?
Yes. No, not the webcam. The one that looks like television. Awesome. We can see them again, Mark. Go ahead. Thank you. Mark, we can't hear you. Can you please use your phone audio versus your computer audio?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you again.
Okay, I don't know what happened, but something got touched. Okay, where did you lose me?
You can start from the top.
Okay. So again, as I said, they're going to be talking about no I in team, perceptions, systemic perceptions, quadruple A, heart of letting go, and then we're going to get into some helping each of us develop more our psychological and emotional and communicational complexity. Because when you think about it, um, diversity, if I'm just talking about inner and outer diversity, what am I talking about? I'm talking about our personality and the environment in which we operate. And what's the bridge between personality and environment? For me, that bridge is communication, cognitive perception and communication. And that's what this program is really about. How do we expand our cognitive awareness and our communication skills? And we'll get into all that. So why am I, okay, here we go. So let me ask, what does there's no I in team mean to you? And how does this relate to diversity and inclusion? And if anybody wants to type in an answer, please feel free. What does there's no I in team mean to you? And how does that relate to diversity? Pro and con. Well, when I think of, and feel free to type in while I'm talking. When I think of there's no I in team, what does that mean? Well, everybody sort of puts aside their ego. That can be a good thing. But it also means I'm not looking really at the individuals in the group. There's no I. Everybody's the same. And what can happen in that context? Groupthink. We all we all get on the same page, even if we're not exactly comfortable with that page, or maybe feel my real authentic voice isn't being heard. I'm going along. I'm being loyal. So this is where, as I say, on one hand, we want that sense of we're all in this together. However, we are all individuals together. So what I like to say, and I remember coming up with this in a program with the military, where I was thinking there's no I in team, and somehow that just didn't sit well with me. So I thought about, well, there may be no I in team, but there are two I's in winning. And these I's can see. And for me, winning teams are involved or bring together IC squared, individual creativity and interactive community. And that to me is really when we're working as a diverse and inclusive team or group or community. So that's where I'm coming from on that one. I hope that's, sort of kind of gets our brain cells cooking. Now, what about some of the systemic issues of workplace diversity? Is D&I a once a year mandated training or integrated into the culture? Is D&I a management checkoff? Okay, the management can say, oh, yeah, I've had training, so I'm into D&I. Obviously, that's not a reality. And then the overall culture is demeaning, harassing, bullying, or ignoring of lower grade employees, denied, tolerated, or covered up. Or job assignments, recognition of promotions based on qualifications, not race or gender. Is there an inner circle? Do all have access to training? Is there an equitable distribution of resources? not just to individuals, but sometimes for departments. Our assignments, recognition, and promotions, not based on individual and group or professional and branch favoritism. I call this sort of organizational IRAs. That is, IRAs stand for incentives, rewards and recognition, and advancement opportunities. Now, this is a concept. Oh, I see a quote, a type in. An individual experience their own intersection being assigned the role of target or agent in multiple systems of privilege oppression. So attending to a differentials of power among individuals on a team is critical. Thank you, Cynthia. That's exactly the point that we really have to look at. Individual differences, and to what extent the larger system is perhaps biasing the power differential. And the reality is different people have different strengths, and we want to recognize those different strengths, not deny them. Are individuals' points of view meaningfully acknowledged? Is there an opportunity? Helmets off. In the military, I discovered this concept. Helmets off. They try to have helmets off meetings. What does helmets off meeting mean? Well, on the helmet, there's the individual's rank. So when you take off a helmet in a meeting, there's no rank in the room. Now, here's the other reality. When the corporal is in a meeting with the colonel, guess what? It's hard for the corporal to feel comfortable speaking up. So some of the smarter, I think, leaders knew to bring in someone like myself to run retreats where we really helped create an environment where people of different rank felt more safe to be real, be genuine, and I remember, one of the commanders saying, and this was before kind of a pre-employment in Iraq, saying, that meeting was one of the best meetings we ever had, and there was more open communication. That is, after the workshop, they went into they went into their own, secret meeting, but he later reported that there was much less siloing and just a more open discussion. So if you can create an atmosphere where people really take their helmets off, despite the differential rank in the room, a lot of good things are possible. Okay, so then we're going to talk about personality differences. I'm going to focus a little bit on introversion, extraversion, and the Thomas-Kilmann conflict problem solving differences. So that's more of a communication and interpersonal relation style differences. But again, as we'll see, inner and outer diversity really means recognizing that we all have greater potential for diversity in the way we think and the way we communicate. And that's what I really believe builds that bridge between individuals and the larger environment. Is there an opportunity for men and women to be heard, to advance? I've been doing some work at a government agency, and over again, you hear women saying that in meetings, I'm not being heard, I'm being ignored. Now, I must say this is a more scientific agency, and so you probably have men that are, to some degree, even more sort of responding in an outmoded way of perceiving women. It used to be a mostly military male scientific agency, and as it has diversified, this is a challenge for the larger environment and for the individuals, all individuals in that environment. Equal opportunity for racial and ethnic groups to be heard, opportunities for different points of view and professional perspectives, whether based on grades, levels, or status. And actually, the next one, is there a superior subordinate culture? For example, technical versus non-technical. Okay, and then I just suddenly IDF has a culture like this. Orders are phrased as requests. You don't know who you're going to run into in real life and in what context. Thank you, Chuck. I remember doing a retreat, again with a scientific-based government agency. And the way they labeled it, you had the professional staff and the administrative staff. And I remember once I heard that, I said, wait a second, that language is not acceptable. Everyone in this room is a professional. Now, there may be, some may have a scientific background, some may have a background, in computer skills or in more administrative talents, but everyone is professional. And I think that's where our language that isn't challenged and it's just sort of, that's the norm, limits our ability to integrate a wide variety of viewpoints. And speaking of number 12. Okay, so those are some of the systemic issues that I think we're probably in this room all too aware of, but I think it's helpful to put them in, together in one place in time. Now, how do we begin to break down this constricted environment? Well, one way, I'm going to start with what I call the Quadruple A of individual and organizational R&R. Respect, responsibility, and resilience. This used to be the AAA, authority, autonomy, and accountability. Meaningful authority, that is are people's knowledge and skills and experience really recognized, not only by peers, but especially by those, in the upper management, in management roles, supervisor and management roles. Autonomy, are people allowed to exercise efficiently and effectively, with a degree of independence, their authority? Is there micromanaging? Is there, constriction on how much appropriate autonomy is exercised? And accountability, are all held to realistically high level of performance standards, and including getting meaningful feedback, opportunity for correction and evaluation. And interestingly, not only does this facilitate a sense of responsibility, but also resilience. That is, studies show that when authority, autonomy, and accountability are really working tools in a culture, that people feel more resilient when dealing with loss and change and stress. And finally, I just recently added a fourth A, accessibility, which really relates again to respect, responsibility, and resilience. And that is, in an inclusive and collaborative environment, all are able to acquire, use, and participate in formal and informal operational information, resources, and decision-making forums. Now, it doesn't mean everyone gets all the same information, but key operational information needs to be shared across the board. So that's something to think about. How is my shop, as it were, doing on the Quadruple A? Authority, autonomy, accessibility, and accountability. Now, as I said, this approach to diversity has not just a systemic approach and not just a sort of operational approach, but we want to get into personality differences. Some of you are probably familiar with the Myers-Briggs, which deals with introversion and extraversion, as well as intuition and sensate processing, thinking and feeling, perception and judging. Introversion and extraversion, research shows, is one of the most powerful ways of distinguishing individuals. And And an introvert doesn't mean that the person is necessarily shy. That's a falsehood. It means that they tune into their internal bodily sensations, thoughts, and feelings to make sense of the world, first and foremost. So they have a greater sensitivity to their inner world. Now, an extrovert is someone who's more stimulated by the external environment and social interaction and has a greater sensitivity to the outer world. However, in both cases, we want to be aware of sensitivity. Is sensitivity creating a reaction, a reactive response, or a reaction as opposed to a response? And this is where sometimes, anyone that isn't managing their emotions well, but sometimes extroverts can be more reactive to immediate environmental stimuli, where introverts are processing more their thoughts and feelings and sensations initially. That can help us be more responsive. First, I want to know what's going on with me before I respond to those comments that I think are cold or insensitive. So this is where, ironically, sometimes introverts can be very effective communicators because their communication tries to integrate the inner world as well as responding to an external stimuli. Now, there is a danger, as I saw recently, again, in an organization with a lot of scientists who often are more introvertish. But just because you're an introvert doesn't mean you are taking the time to understand your feelings. You may be more focused on your thoughts. And so you're not really trying to understand as much your bodily sensations and emotions. So when that happens, when you have people who are not doing that, what I call head work, heart work, and homework, and you put them in leadership positions, what's the potential problem? You've got people who are not really focused on the emotional side of the people that they're supervising. Okay, thank you, Chuck, again for your comment about, information processing and sensitivity. So again, things that are both strength can be strengths, but also can be drawbacks. If the introversion is almost used as an excuse, well, I'm just an introvert. Sure, I'm not going to pay as much attention as some of those extroverts to other people's problems. And this is where, when we allow that, we kind of give someone a pass instead of expecting them, hey, yes, introversion may be your dominant mode, but that doesn't mean you can't develop other aspects of yourself in terms of being more responsive to, sensitive to other people. But of course, for the introvert that has that difficulty, it really means spending more time becoming self-aware and comfortable with their own emotions. So this is the challenge that I'm presenting to all of us. myself included, how do we become more complex human beings? Okay. Ooh. Let's talk about this slide. Because the way the question is, how do we become more complex human beings? How do we become more tough and tender, as I like to say? First step is often letting go. Letting go of some of the, oh, this is just the way I am. It's my personality. You know, this is who I am. I've worked hard to be this is my true self. Well, there may be some truth to that, but then, yes, as noted, every non-pathological trait confers both strengths and weaknesses. And even some a little bit pathological can have that side. So let's talk about letting go. Because when we're dealing with loss, we're dealing with loss of control, of dreams, ghosts, those old voices in our head, health, relations, mobility, the loss of a move, and also loss can relate to power and pride. Call it ego, when your ego's driving you, not the ostensible goal. And how often it is so hard to step back and look at an issue when our pride is involved. Disarming power struggles, certainly letting go. I do a drop the rope exercise. Well, why is it so hard to drop the rope? I'm not going to let that person think they have something over me, or they're better than me, or that they, can make me feel a certain way. And again, are we putting too much blame on that other person? Letting go of self-defeating habits, addictions, beliefs. This is a real tough one and takes a good bit of work. But again, if we don't challenge these patterns, we get locked in. Family myths and secrets. It could be organizational myths and secrets. This keeps people in the dark and leads to a lot of self-confusion. Why am I feeling this way? Something's not real. The intimate foe, fear of exposure. How do we recognize that we all have that intimate foe? Let me tell you a story about my father, who challenged himself. He had a tough childhood. He even had a breakdown when I was 1.5 and was hospitalized and had shock therapy, unfortunately, for many years. Until life is crazy and complex, never as straightforward as we think it is, until he had an affair with a woman who told him, "You're crazy. You don't need shock therapy. Get into psychotherapy." He'd been taking shock therapy for 15 years, going along, him and my mother, with the medical protocol. And of course, once he stopped taking the shock therapy and got into psychotherapy, he never needed shock therapy again. But let's go ahead just a little bit. So he's been in therapy, and two things I want to focus on. One day he's walking out of the New York City Metro, down the subway, down the stairs, and he does what he's done for many decades. He reflexively takes out a pack of cigarettes and is ready, starts lighting up. But this time, he suddenly catches himself. "What are you doing? You're in therapy now. You're trying to make your life over again, make it healthier, wholer. And he had also started taking up tennis, which I'll tell you about shortly. Anyway, he realized this is crazy. This is crazy. He crunched up the cigarette pack and that cigarette and threw it away and never touched a cigarette again. This is a 2-pack-a-day smoker for a couple of decades or more. He also, as I said, was taking up tennis. Now, why was that so significant? Well, his older brother was a great athlete. And my father felt he couldn't compete with him. So here, an aggressive type A New Yorker gave up playing most sports. He got good in pool. He would hang out sometimes at the billiard hall playing pool. But the point is, he took up tennis after he went into therapy, decided to challenge himself. And he really got a coach, really took lessons, but was always, he had made some changes in his career path, so he was able to get on the tennis court quite frequently in the evenings, early evenings, late afternoons. And one day he calls up his brother and says, Jules, let's play tennis. And what do you think happened? The highlight of his midlife. He beat his brother in tennis. Now, I don't tell that story just to, go, woohoo, you beat your brother. No, there's another reason I tell that story and why I think it's so important. And really has to do with he's making these psychological and emotional changes. My dad was willing to open the Pandora's box. There was a lot of shame, a lot of feelings of failure, worthlessness around not playing sports as a young kid, and even as a young adult. He had the courage to take up a sport, or any kind of sport for him, that was going to stir up a lot of shameful feelings of unworthiness. And he had the courage to face that. He was determined to, get as good as he could in that sport. But it really, the courage was that he was determined to revisit parts of himself that he had shunned because of the pain. So I think that's the real moral here, that if we're going to create inner and outer diversity, we've got to let go of some of the power, let go of some of the status, and of course people are going to fight that. But we've got to let go of some of the things that keep us less internally diverse as we can be. Let me see what this Cynthia is making a comment. Yes. Certainly, we often are not aware of the power that we have based on our cultural and situational advantages. Yes, grief is part of letting those beliefs go and replacing them with new, correct information. That really is the sort of essence of this presentation. And okay, and here's just an exercise that you can do on your own sometime. Identify a letting go experience that challenged your sense of self-esteem, status, and power. What were the barriers to letting go or bringing this vision to life? What were the bridges? Why is letting go so challenging in the personal and professional arenas? What does it take to challenge the internal and external status quo? Well, we've talked about some of the things in my dad's story, the fear of failure, the fear, the shame, all those things make it hard to let go. And I just put this together as, so how do we let go? Well, I've come up with what I call kind of the art of designing disorder, some steps for creative risk-taking. So the thing is, recognize and focus on constructive discontent. Finally, my father was realizing that there was a part of him that wanted to overcome that childhood fear of taking up a sport. And always feeling like he was inferior, maybe especially to his older brother. Then you want to warily jump in over your head. And you may need a nudge. I guess my father's nudge was, well, he had a few nudges from that woman that he had a brief affair with. And to my mother's credit, she took him back, and they both worked on the marriage. So jumping over your head, you may need a little bit of a push. But what happens when you jump in over your head? Well, you connect to resources quickly. It's scary, but you really find out what your strengths and vulnerabilities are. And as long as you have kind of what I call a stress buddy around, your survival rate is much, much higher. Someone you can process your feelings with. So strive to survive the high dive. Then thrive on frustration. We know that when you allow yourself to stay with these difficult emotions, it loosens up defenses. Feelings and memories from your past can come up. Now, not only is it painful, but if you can also take an incubation vacation, you can hatch a new perspective. That is, you're now having more information in which to process the problem. So by allowing memories from the past, as well as present situations, to really influence your database, you're creating, in effect, your own diversity, a more diverse informational pool, a richer pool. And finally, build in a whole process that recognizes how important error is. So I like to say, learn to fail or fail to learn. Get feedback. None of us are perfect. We can always improve. And this whole process allows one to recognize and to design new opportunities. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't going to be environmental situations that are going to push back, for sure. But I think the more diverse we are inside, the better we can constructively challenge and communicate with those forces. And sometimes it just has to be, you have to take legal measure, as it were. There are people in the environment, that the only way you stop them is through, legal measures. So it's never easy. It's never easy. And a quote that I like: if no matter what you do or how hard you try, results, rewards, recognition, and relief are not forthcoming, and you can't say no or won't let go, trouble awaits. If you can't say no or won't let go because you've invested so much time, identity, money, energy, ego in one right person, one right position, one right possible acceptable outcome. Trouble awaits. The groundwork is being laid for apathy, callousness, and despair. You know what? I'm going to move on. We've talked about loss a little bit, but let me just quickly, another source of complexity is in our communication style and our conflict resolution style. Some of you may be familiar with the Thomas-Kilmann conflict style inventory. It's basically, there are two dimensions. Are you high and low on assertiveness or low and high on cooperativeness? And if you look at the table, you can see that high assertiveness and low cooperativeness is the competition style. What's the, I always like to ask, what's the pros and cons of the competition style? Well, they like to win, they like to be first. The downside is it can be all about me. And not only is there no I in team, but who cares about the team? So it's pro and con. What about low assertiveness, low cooperativeness? It's called the avoidance style. Now, avoidance, you think about, oh, that's not good. People's afraid to deal with problems, afraid to speak up, sort of hide, go in their shell. But wait a second. What about the person that wants to think a little bit more before they just shoot from the lip? They want to do more research, maybe want to talk to others, get more information. So sometimes there's a maturity, there's a planned sort of avoidance or a delay. What about low cooperativeness and low competition and high cooperativeness? That's accommodation. Accommodating is inviting others, wanting to help others become part of the team. A lot of positives. But again, what's the drawback? How about those that sort of are always looking out for others, but sort of sacrificing their own needs? Someone said burnout's less a sign of failure and more that we gave ourselves away. Too accommodating, and you often become left feeling very frustrated and angry. What about the middle one? Because we're going to wait for one of them. Middle assertiveness, middle cooperativeness is compromise. Compromise is good. Let's get this problem solved. Let's show of hands, But what's the drawback really with compromise? It's quick and dirty. It's too easy. A lot of people might not feel like they've been outvoted. My side hasn't been heard. And that's the problem, is that compromise often doesn't get to the deeper issues and deeper concerns. And that's where the paradox of collaboration, being high assertive and high cooperative, it is the goal. If you really want to get people to talk openly, honestly, to use difference as not just to tear each other down, but really to build up a greater whole, to create that synergy. That whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But what's the downside or the drawback to collaboration, or the price you pay for collaboration? It takes time and energy. It's not easy to build up that trust, to break down barriers. So obviously collaboration can't happen in every situation. However, I remember a commander at Fort Hood taught me a very important point. He said, Mark, it's easy to get people to order people around. The real problem is creating buy-in. And the way that he would create buy-in is when they had time at meetings, they would really try to have those helmets off meetings, so that the corporal really felt Commander Phelps was really listening to his point of view. Now, there's a difference between acknowledgement and agreement. Just because I acknowledge you, really have listened, doesn't mean I have to agree. But everyone wants to feel genuinely heard. And sure enough, because Colonel Phelps took the time to really hear different people's points of view, when they were in a situation where he had to say, we gotta go to that hill right now, that corporal really believed that Colonel Phelps wasn't just ordering him around. He was understood who he was, and in turn, he would give his best for Colonel Phelps. It's his role, of course, as a soldier to do that, but don't minimize the importance of that individual relationship. Let's see, we've got a few more minutes. So anyway, what I like about this model is not only does it challenge us to develop our conflict styles, to be more than just one box, as it were, but it shows that each of these styles has a pro and a con, and that's the complexity of life. Strength and weaknesses, I think it was mentioned before. Okay, this is an exercise that I do. It's a lot of fun. You're gonna break two people off, and one person is told that they're giving a presentation at an important, let's say, board meeting, and they're getting feedback from someone else. Good point. Okay, let's go back to that, Cynthia. Good point. Compromise, especially when it's, let's take a vote. Oh, well, the majority won. And yeah, compromise can be another form of conflict aversion. We really don't want to take the time to find out what people are really thinking and feeling. We don't want to open up some of those hidden agendas, which good collaboration, needs to do. And so again, I think this is right on, because a lot of people think compromise, well, it's very reasonable, but it's not getting to the deeper and broader issues, unfortunately. Anyway, this is where one person gives the other person feedback, and it's a surprise. I'm gonna frustrate myself and frustrate us here, just to say that it's the person's expecting reasonable feedback, and then they wind up getting, wow, you really fumbled the data, and I thought you said you were prepared, and obviously it's a purposefully harsh feedback that I'm providing to teach some, kind of reinforce some teaching points. And why is this related to diversity and inclusion? Because if you remember from the beginning, I've said that the bridge between personality and environment is communicational awareness, is cognitive awareness, and communicational authenticity. And so we want to be able, when someone is giving us that harsh feedback, we want to be able to distinguish between a reaction and a response. I find when people hear, boy, did you fumble the data? I thought you said you were prepared. There's three types of in essence, reaction responses. Feeling like, what makes you think you know what you're talking about? Or person feels like they sort of pull down their pants. Oh, I didn't know I did so bad. Oh, I feel terrible. Or, wait a second. Let's talk about this a little bit more. That's a more response, less a reaction. And the key is that we don't confuse evoke and provoke. You know, if someone hits us over the head with a bat, yeah, they provoked us. If someone says something stupid, even cruel, it probably has stirred up some old feelings inside of us, some feelings of self-esteem issues, worthiness issues. Because what we can say, and using I messages, and you just very quickly, the difference between I and you messages, 2 words. You're wrong. I disagree. Can you hear and feel the difference if someone is kind of confronting you with you're wrong versus I disagree? Clearly, you're wrong is totally dismissive. It's a blaming you message. And not only it just blames you as an entity. Where I disagree is saying I'm recognizing your position. I have some differences here. Of course, it's not always easy to replace blaming yous with assertive I's. Remember, a supervisor once asked me, Mark, is this an I message? I think you're wrong. No, Patty, that's a sneaky you message. So we know that's, so it turns, and then when someone hits you with, boy, I thought you said you were prepared, you know, that was a pretty weak, you know, that was really, you know, that was real, what did I call it? Thought you said you prepared, and boy, did you fumble the data. Key is not to come up with an immediate justification, but to say, wait a second, I don't mind feedback, but I won't accept that kind of harsh communication. That's not going to work. Either we deal with this in a more professional way, or you know, some other time. And I think that's the key, is when someone confronts you in a really hostile way, the first thing should never be you trying to justify yourself. The first thing should be putting the brakes on hostile communication. Wait a second, that's not acceptable. That kind of communicating is not acceptable. Either we, you know, try again, or I'm out of here. Now, there may be some times where you can't say I'm out of here, but you can say, can we really try to approach this in a less, you know, demeaning manner? And of course, things to keep in mind is the critic have an agenda. Maybe they were jealous that you had the opportunity to speak at that board meeting. Okay. Another communication skill I think is important is ask good questions. You know, really I'd like to hear your thoughts, because there are 2 pillars of a good question. The humility pillar, I don't have all the answers, and the openness pillar. I really would like to hear your perspective. I have a feeling that we should probably wrap up, or I should wrap up, because with only about 5 minutes left, and I would like to take some questions. But let me give you some thoughts on structures for team resilience and collaboration. And maybe with a new, I should acknowledge that with a new presentation, I'm I'm probably including more information than I, could handle, obviously, in an hour's time. So this is good learning for me. I hope there was enough useful information shared that even though we didn't get to all of it, I'd be happy to, send you the slides, and if you'd like to see all the slides, I'd be happy to get that to you. But anyway, here's some final thoughts on what we can do to really build more inspiring, interactive, and inclusive, I should say, leadership and teams. Try to have what I call a wavelength segment. This is where the supervisor, or the person running the meeting, either in the beginning, but maybe at the end, leaves 10 minutes, 15 minutes to really talk about how we're doing as a team, not just the time numbers and task-driven, issues that often dominate. But let's take some time out to talk about how are we doing as a team. So it's a high task and high touch. And not only it doesn't just have to be the supervisor or the manager running a meeting. I'd like to see that manager wear more the team member hat, and maybe get, employees as facilitators for these team meetings. The supervisor and the facilitator can work on agenda, but maybe have a facilitator, and they rotate, every 2 months or every month, whatever. So you really get some diversity and more inclusion in leadership roles. Other things to keep in mind, I always like a morning quickie, like a little team huddle, and informal lunches. I remember this one branch manager at NIH, National Institute of Health, really had twice a year, she had a meeting with her staff to talk about just your career planning and how I can help you advance your career. I remember a plant manager at the Postal Service would just meet with frontline supervisors and employees, a section of them, once a month, so he could really hear what's going on at the front lines, unfiltered from his managers. Pilot projects, pizza parties, so really a way of cross-fertilizing. Getting information from outside sources. That's one of the ways you get synergy going. Get information from new sources. And then finally, it's always important to manage stress carriers. We've seen with this Me Too movement how destructive that can be when leadership tolerates these dysfunctional and destructive individuals. And of course, the stress doc is ready and rested. Okay, I think I'm going to stop. I'm sure I haven't left much time for questions. I have very much appreciated the comments that have come in. If anyone does have a question, I'm willing to stay, to respond.
Thanks for attending, everyone. If you have any questions, you can type those into the questions box, and we can get those answered for you while we still have Mark on the line. This webinar is being recorded, and all of you will receive an email registration link so that you can get a copy of the presentation. And I will also send you a copy of Mark's slides so that you can have the entire presentation that he prepared for you.
Thank you, Mavis.
It doesn't look like we have any new questions.
Okay.
So again, I'd like to thank you for your time today, and look for an email coming with the webinar recording and the email slides. And I'm going to see if I can get our chat conversations included in that information that I get to you as well. Thanks again, Mark. You are awesome.
Oh, Mavis, is it possible for me to get a recording, a link to the recording?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And
All
again,
right,
thank you
no
for
problem.
all your patience and professionalism with me.
Oh, no problem at all. You have a
Okay.
good afternoon.
Okay. Take care.
All right.
Look forward
Bye
to
bye.
seeing you soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye bye.